It's time to be woke, take off your shades, it helps see through the smoke, cause the wicked hide behind the cloak, and if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked, so listen up, cause this hair of the dog, what's real, what ain't, is this the fog or smog, cause there's a difference when you breathe it in, so don't let the corporate media take you for a spin, this that morning show, they put you in the know, so I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, 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 yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Speeding the facts.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog. I'm Andy Kennedy. This fine Wednesday morning where North America has basically been flipped around, where it's hotter in the north than it is in the south. And we've got all kinds of things going on in terms of what we like to call climate change, which apparently not enough people know about or believe in yet. And as we look at places in Canada, especially on the West Coast, that are recording temperatures in excess of 115 degrees Fahrenheit, if you're still denying that climate change is a problem, you're either not you're a couple of noodles short of a full plate of spaghetti, or you're a bit of a bastard at this point. I think that has to be said. Regardless of that, welcome. Thank you very much for tuning in today. We've got a great show. I do want to let you know that my lovely and talented co-host Carrie is a little bit in the scenario of being George Clooney in a boat in the perfect storm. She's got the remnants of a hurricane that's passing over. Her internet is spotty at best, but we will try to appease the internet gods and see if she could participate today, which I think is probably a good segue into introducing her. Good morning, Carrie. Are you there, Carrie? Can you hear me? Over. All right, that's not a good start. Okay. Well, anyways, what I'm going to do then is I am going to introduce our guest for today, which is our good buddy Dre, who's a friend of the show. It's been on a couple of times. Good morning, Dre. How are you doing this morning?
Morning, I'm good. My internet is luckily working today.
Well, I'm glad somebody other than mine is as well. It's good to see you. I'm glad you could make it by. I've got a lot of stuff that we can talk about today. Some current event stuff and some things that are going on, especially in the Biden administration, and things that we've seen lately in terms of policy positions and events that could be described from the progressive left as at worst disturbing, including what happened on Sunday with more drone strikes in the area of the Syria-Iraq border, which is also nice if you're an elitist Democrat. You know, things are back to normal, right? Mm-hmm. Which is always great. So I am just going to do one more quick check and see. Oh, Carrie, are you there, Carrie?
I'm here for a brief moment. For those, we're going to get into the climate change. I am in New Mexico in the middle of a hurricane. Figure that shit out. This is why the internet is so bad for me today. We've had flash floods, storms galore. It has been pouring rain in the desert of New Mexico. We have a hurricane. Think about that for a second. So this is why my internet is craptacular. So I apologize. I can get to the chat. So for those of you who are tuning in, good morning Wednesday. We are live and interactive. Anything can happen. So make sure you put your comments, questions for Jay, join it, or Dre, join into the conversation. Oh boy, it's been a morning. Put it in the chat. I will likely be able to get to the chat even if my video drops. So yeah, thank you. And thank you, Dre, for joining us this morning.
Uh-oh.
Oh, did we lose Dre? No. Okay, well, it's all right.
Okay,
you know.
now that's seriously wrong. And I'm starting to wonder, that the two of you can't be on at the same time. And
Because we're the
coincidence?
Same person, that's right.
Well, you do look so much alike.
Right, me and Batman have never been in the same room together. Hey, Holly, good morning. She said, stay safe. I'm trying, I swear I'm trying. Yeah, I got my little floaties ready to go. But yeah, so that's what's going on with our broadcast this morning. Hopefully Dre brings us back. So Andy, it was choppy, so I couldn't hear. Which graphic are we going to go with first?
Which one are we going to go with first? Well, I think we should start off in the Ohio special election.
Ohio special election. Okay, so this election is coming up August 3rd, and this is for Miss Fudge. Miss Fudge was a congresswoman from Ohio who got elevated into the Biden administration. So just like here in New Mexico, we had a special election. They have one there in Ohio, and it's August 3rd for those of you who are in Ohio. So what's interesting about this one is last week we had the Queen Bee herself, Hillary Rodham Clinton, endorse Brown. Brown is a centrist corporatist, full-on pack money, do whatever you ask, Democrat. And Nina Turner, this is her home, her area where she grew up, all of this sort of thing. She was state senator representing this area. She is now running for U.S. Congress, representative in Congress. So we can't absolutely have that happen. So, Hillary, her endorsement tanked Brown. Brown is now at 15 points popularity, whereas Nina is at 50%. So what had to happen was you had to have Clyburn come out. Clyburn comes out, as he does. He's also a representative from Ohio, but he's also somebody who's taken big fat checks, more than most. I think he's actually setting a record because he's taking more money from pharmaceutical companies than anybody. And here's his quote that I thought was just brilliant. Came out with this endorsement for Brown. Part of what he told the New York Times is that his decision to endorse Brown obviously had nothing to do with Sanders or Turner, which is bullshit.
Obviously.
Right. But he said that it had to do with sloganeering. Like, he has spoken against defund the police from the beginning, and he said, and I can't do it in the I'm made of cheese voice, but he is done, and I'm totally making fun of him. I'm totally making fun of him because he should have retired a decade ago. Thank you for your service. We appreciate that. Please go sit down. And I think in this instance, he's like, well, the words matter and you're hurting our party. So what, that people are dying? To fund the police is just, no, it's your job to articulate that. And he refuses to do so. He likes easy things. So he didn't like defund the police. And all of a sudden now he doesn't like Medicare for all. So what he's actually saying is he doesn't want everyone in the country to be covered. And for those of you who are still not aware, Clyburn is getting his platinum level policy that no one in the US can buy, platinum level, paid for through public funds. This is the public purse. So he is doing his best Marie Antoinette impression here, saying that I don't like the sloganeering of Medicare for all. Doesn't obviously want everyone to have it, certainly not his constituents. So he's going to weigh in with Brown and say that progressive slogans like defund the police and Medicare for all could hurt the party as a whole. Bullshit. People dying hurts the party as a whole. Inaction hurts the party as a whole. Performative measures like giving us Juneteenth, but not working on reform and due process and constitutional protected rights, those hurt the party. So That's just me.
Absolutely. That's the key, right? Like the policies, the progressive policies that Nina Turner stands for, right? Are they're
Particular take.
oh, please. Okay. Are we back here?
good.
Dre's good.
I'm good.
Oh, sweet. We
I
got Dre
just
back.
I just looked out the window and noticed that it's gotten darker.
Are you getting a storm too? Are you
Yeah.
getting a hurricane? Yeah.
I'm
Holly,
starting to think that the weather is being controlled by Facebook.
it could be. Could be. Doesn't want us talking. Don't know the truth. So yeah.
I was just going to point out before I was algorithmed by God that I think that Mr. Clyburn is less worried about progressive policy that's going to harm the party, is more that's going to harm his bank account, maybe.
Right. And there's a fundamental problem with your representative democracy when your representative goes to office to enrich themselves over representing you. They're supposed to be an errand boy for you and your area, not like, okay, so during the COVID thing where you had what was it, 4 or 5 Congress people who made stock trades. All that's illegal. They should be sitting in jail now. And there were Democrats and Republicans. They're not, because they're making money off of what we're doing, right? I mean, Pelosi's husband, this is what he does for a living. There's a conflict of interest there. So I totally agree with you on that one, Andy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's something I want Dre to weigh in on, is that when we see that there are these black politicians or anybody that's in the celebrity limelight that's are repeating these gaslighting talking points, that it's that they've made it in the capitalist game and like where they are, and now now there's no problems, not to see here, move along. Do you want to weigh in on that, Trey?
Yeah, so there was a Supreme Court decision, I believe in 79 or 77 maybe, Buckley Vallejo, that pretty much said money equals free speech. So these people got elected by taking money from these large corporations. And the thing about it is the person that raises the most money in these local elections, they win, I believe, 98% of the time. So that's what got him into office. So he's going to continue serving that same base that got him into office. Because in reality, even though the people vote, what gets these politicians elected is the advertisement that these corporations are able to fund their campaigns to get their name out. Because in the end, name recognition is what wins. Policy wins out sometimes. It's more common now for that to happen because of social media. But prior to that, especially when Jim Clyburn got elected, that wasn't a thing. You won by being able to make appearance on the major news companies, buying advertisement in newspapers. So that's how he won. That's how he won, and that's how he became much more wealthy than he would have been otherwise. So he's going to continue serving that base rather than his constituents.
Like, I remember a very distinct interview with Morgan Freeman. Right now, Morgan Freeman clearly is one of the most popular actors of our age, of this generation. Right, he's in the last generation as well, and him outright denying that racism was a problem in the United States. Right?
Yeah, complete nonsense. Because once you get rich, then it's kind of, well, a lot of these people who are rich, once they get rich, they don't want to speak about issues that affect them because they got rich being by spewing neoliberal talking points. And neoliberal talking points never serves minorities, whether it's Black, Hispanic, Asian. It always serves rich people, and it always serves especially rich white people. And they don't want to speak against that because they're in the minority of people who was able to make it. So it's the same thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Are you still with us, Carrie? Just
I'm
checking.
still here. I'm nodding my head because I think Dre is totally on point. And I gotta say, from electoral politics perspective, he's right about the name recognition, because if you've ever been a poll watcher, and if you haven't, shame on you, go do it. You will see that people will go into a voting booth and go, well, I'm just going to pick one Republican, one Democrat, or, oh, I like the way this name sounds, or, oh, I know this name, and don't know anything about policy. So if you're an incumbent, you already have that advantage. So if you look out at like Cook's Register, where it shows you in a district, whether it's plus or minus Democrat, Republican, you'll see all of that. And particularly if it's a Democratic progressive challenger against an incumbent, you have a really tough time. And this is why I tell progressives, hey, this is not a lottery. You cannot start your campaign in the election season. You needed to start a year ago and get your name out there, volunteering, doing everything else, because no amount of enthusiasm is going to counter millions of dollars that's about to be spent against you in TV ads, newspaper, radio, all of these sorts of things, because I think Dre is absolutely right. So real quick, I want to get to comment here. Leslie, good morning, Leslie. Leslie said the old Black leadership class are really selling us out. I think you're right, Leslie, because we saw this in South Carolina during the last primary. And then Dre, you touched on it, right? So race and ethnicity and gender orientation, none of that matters when you get to a certain financial class. When you move up the caste system, everybody has no problem with it, right? You could be Quasimodo running around half naked in a tutu, but if you got money, everybody's going to welcome you in. No questions asked. Would you agree with that, Dre?
Yeah, I agree. The rich people get away with so much that the average common person just can't, especially on Wall Street. They're the biggest criminals in the country.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Mrs. Ropic says the same thing. Name, most people are not well educated on politics. They are propaganda puppets. And I wonder if, it is my opinion, I believe that all the bullshit headlines that we see over and over and over again are meant to get people to tune out, because they don't want you to know about any of this stuff. So the average person obviously doesn't know what's going on, doesn't know about Syria, doesn't know about, well, Andy, you and I talked about it yesterday, this whole thing with climate change. Nobody's really paying attention. Well,
exactly. Like, we just recently did a Macro and Cheese with Warren Mosler. And of course, if you don't know who Warren is and you've watched us before, your head's in the sand. But Warren made a very good point that when the pandemic first started at the beginning of 2020, we showed that we could cut back on harmful emissions by 50%, because we did, by getting rid of the stuff that we didn't need to do. When people were staying at home, there was less travel. The airline industry basically came to a complete halt. We cut harmful emissions by 50%. So for the last however many decades, people have been trying to figure out how to do it. It took 15 minutes to do it a year and a half ago, right? And now we should have learned those lessons. We could have learned those lessons, but now, no, we're going back to normal, where we're going right back to where we were before. And now we're talking with the Biden administration is talking about setting up these groups, these think tanks and task force to figure out how to cut emissions by 50%. Like, yeah. What's up with that?
Let people.
We just figured it out, but now we forget because we don't want we can't cost the donor class any money, so we're going to have to figure out a different way to do it. Well, you know what? We're destroying our ability to live on this planet. If you want any evidence of that, Go visit relatives on the West Coast.
Exactly. And this is where business leadership, and we've talked about this, and it is my opinion, the CEOs of today, you can replace them with a 9-year-old and be just as effective. They're not leaders. So Andy, this next graphic, the CEOs today are not looking at the opportunities, instead failing to recognize they are literally killing their own consumers. So that's not a sustainable plan. So yeah, let's talk about the climate here. And if you missed the beginning of the show where my internet is still crappy, I am in the middle of a hurricane right now in New Mexico. Pull out your map, look at the geography. There's no ocean around me, right? So
well, if it keeps raining like this, there might soon be.
There might be. Yeah, so there was a hurricane off the coast of Mexico that it came straight through New Mexico. We are under flash flood warnings, all sorts of things here. That never happens here. I live in a desert. It was 59 degrees as the high yesterday. Meanwhile, in Seattle in the Northwest, here, I loved Rebecca, her tweet on this, and what she says, for those of you who are just listening in, she said a handful of air-conditioned hotel rooms left in Tacoma yesterday during the 104 temps were all going for $400 and up from $100 the day before. The rich chilled, the poor roasted, and this is the future as long as capitalism reigns. I loved it because replies to her tweets were like, isn't that illegal? And no, it's not illegal, because the Biden administration has not declared a state of emergency in Seattle, in Washington, in the Northwest. If they had, they would be entitled to some sort of judicial rectifying situation in this, but they're not. So hotel rooms are going for $400 and up. So this was during the same time that officials said that there were half a dozen deaths in Washington and Oregon that were tied to the intense heat. So for those who aren't aware, it's not just the heat. These states have been inundated with rain for days prior to the temperatures going up. And if you live in a farm state like Ohio or Illinois or anything else, particularly where they grow corn, you know that the humidity that is produced there, along with the heat, that provides the danger. So the human body cannot withstand high temperatures and high humidity. You go into shock, right? So this is what
that's exactly right.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. And if you don't live in an area that, you know, is inundated with humidex ratings like this, and let's be honest, there's up until now, there hasn't been a lot of places like in Ontario, where I am, because we're surrounded by the Great Lakes. As the fronts go across, they pick up moisture into the clouds, and then they either drop it down or we just get into this warm air humidex. And if you don't think that it makes a difference, the temperature could be, say, 88, 90 degrees outside. But when it's humid, that adds a 10 to 15 degree increase to that temperature because of what it feels like, because the air is so humid. Imagine you're in your air-conditioned home or apartment or wherever. You open the front door and somebody has a bucket of hot water and they dump it on you as soon as you walk outside. That's what it feels like, right? And people can't deal with that, especially aged people, you know, or, you know, young children are susceptible to it. Anybody with health issues is susceptible to it. And that's why it's so dangerous, right?
Yeah, breathing issues also during a pandemic of COVID. But Leslie, I'm so feeling Leslie this morning. I'm so glad you joined us. She's just delightful. Leslie says they always need a study or a think tank to do the most basic shit. Absolutely. And then she says it was 100 degrees in Theodore, Alabama yesterday. Good Lord. And it ain't nothing but humid in Alabama. That's unbelievable. And then Misanthropic brought this to our attention. He said there is a FEMA declaration for the fallen condo in Miami, but not for Seattle. So he says, yeah, state of emergency was declared for the condo. So, you know, hearts go out to the families there. I was reading, that's story yesterday, 2 years of inaction. Yeah, there's going to be some losses there. 100, I think it was 150 people still missing. So, yeah, that's horrible situation, but all the people statewide and all, and part of it is you've got Seattle, well, you've got Washington, Oregon, all across the Midwest, Alabama, you guys are screwed, and everywhere, Georgia and everything else, all of the same stuff is coming for you. At the same time, I'm getting 50 degrees. So what happens to all of these states that grow our food?
Oh, exactly. That's exactly right.
So Dre, you're in Brooklyn. Now we've got these brownstones and walk-ups, and people don't have air and all of the higher up you go in a it gets. How are you guys doing in New York right now?
I didn't hear the last part. It cut out.
Oh, okay. Just wondering what's going on in Brooklyn right now with the heat and brownstones and walk-ups and how hot it gets in a city, and then living in a second, third, or higher apartment.
So right now in Brooklyn, it's about 94 degrees, and it's about 11 a.m. in the morning. So it's pretty hot.
Wow.
When living in I haven't lived past the second. I haven't lived not on the first floor in like 15 years. So I can't really say. But I do know on brownstones and things like that, it starts to break. It starts to crack because of how hot it is. And it's so hot that if you touch it, you get second-degree burns. It's pretty crazy.
Well, we saw that same thing in Seattle where the roads are cracking just because of the moisture and the heat and everything else. And now you've got New York where, okay, it gets hot there because of the pavement and everything else, but not like this. Not this kind of heat and humidity. Oh boy. Yeah, so
one thing I wanted to add to this, and this is just a quick story, that I was a volunteer driver for the 2015 Pan Am Games when they were here in the Toronto, Greater Toronto area. So our job was to pick up athletes or coaches or VIPs and shuttle them to wherever they need to go from the athletes village to their different venues where they had to play. And because it was Pan Am Games in North America only, you had North and South America, any of the countries that were in South America or in the Central America, because I would have my vehicle, and of course, being a Canadian, I'm certainly not used to the temperatures that those other countries are. I would, have my air conditioning on in the vehicle and just be waiting to pick somebody up. And anytime I had athletes that were from those regions, they would automatically ask me to turn off the air conditioning and roll the windows down because they weren't used to the cold. They were used to the hot weather, right? These temperatures happen normally in those regions of the world, but they're used to them because they happen all the time, right? But that just tells you, if it's going to get this hot now in North America, especially in around the US-Canada border, how hot is it going to get down there in those countries, right?
Oh, yeah, and this is where we need to be paying attention. And I did look up, and I was like, okay, so what is the Biden administration doing right now while we have this crisis? No FEMA declaration. Thank you, misanthropic. So he took the opportunity to poke fun of Republicans who were climate deniers and was a little snarky. I'm like, okay, great. That's nice. Take that victory lap, do something. And I could not find anything that the administration has done, no statements, nothing public. Maybe they're doing something behind the scenes, but I couldn't find it. If you're aware of it, share it. Let me know, but I certainly didn't find anything. But so all of this, when it comes to climate change and all of these things, it leads into our topic about disability. So while all of us are struggling, and I don't want to diminish what the individual is going through, because it's very real. It's still trauma. We're going to take a step and look at disability in context of this. So just from on a good day, getting your food and transportation and everything else that you need to survive as a disabled person costs you more, takes longer, and is harder to get right. And I will say, I am mostly blind, and the reason I don't use a cane, because I will tell you, people will kick your cane and they will kick you. I've seen it happen. I have seen people deliberately trip blind people. This is why I don't use one. I will make my way as best I can. I would rather you not know. So these are just little things in the course of a day that the disabled people have to watch out for. Never mind the fact that in the fight for 15, you may be making $7, $8, $10 an hour. As a disabled person, legally, you can be paid $3.25 up to $3.75, and that's totally cool. Why would you do that? At the same time, all of your expenses are more increased just to get to that job. So, Dre, you had a beautiful, beautiful story that you posted on Facebook, and I'm hoping that you can share that with the audience today, just so they can get an understanding, because you're a young guy, you're in shape, good looking. Who would even know that you sometimes struggle with the disability?
Yeah, so the reason I posted the story is because I someone would see me and assume that I'm pretty healthy based on how I look like, not realizing that I deal with several disabilities. So I'll start with my foot, because that's what's been bothering me the longest. I had ankle surgery back in 2011. I put 2012, but it's actually, in 2012, I had ankle surgery, February 2nd, 2012. And that was to repair like torn ligaments in my ankle and a broken bone. So I never was able to recover from that injury. And because I was walking with my gait was off because of how I was walking, trying not to put so much pressure on the ankle, I ended up having hip issues. Found out that I was born with the deformed hip, which affected me later in life. Tore ligaments in my knee, so it was a big struggle for ever, and still is a struggle today. And just getting around, I was in a wheelchair for a period of 2.5 years. Being in the wheelchair, I couldn't really get anywhere. I was actually using my grandmother's wheelchair while she was in the hospital, and that's how I was able to get around. And I was unable to really do anything because I needed another surgery, but that couldn't be done because I didn't have health insurance. My health insurance, for whatever reason, lapsed, and something happened with my Social Security card. I think I misplaced it or lost it. So they said I couldn't get health insurance unless I was able to find my Social Security card. But the problem was I couldn't get out of the house because actually at this time I wasn't using my nana's wheelchair because I started using it after she passed. So she had a wheelchair. I was stuck in the house, a bad foot on one leg, a bad knee on the other. So I couldn't go anywhere for 2 years. And no one in the house actually had the funds to provide for me to actually go to the places to get these things. So the only reason I was able to do so is because of my principal heard about me, my former principal in high school, Matt Brown, who's an amazing person, and Monique and Eric Waterman, who are like a mother and a second mom and father to me. They were able to provide the funds in order to help me to get health insurance. So without them, I was I was literally just staying in my room all day, unable to go anywhere for 2 years until my nana passed. I was using her wheelchair to get around.
That is okay. So I'm listening to your story, and my heart just breaks because here you were. You're so young, and it's horrific to happen to anybody at any age. But now, with COVID, people were losing their shit because they couldn't go out or do whatever. But here's a point that I want everybody in the audience to understand. When you have a chronic issue that is a qualified disability, whether it's mental or physical, there is a traumatic experience where you have to go through and fill out the paperwork with Social Security, and then they disregard most of what your doctors and specialists say and send you to others who, when you go to those doctors, I'm sure they mean well, but they're very accusatory and they're trying to weed out the people who are just gaming the system. I can tell you there are so few people gaming the system. They don't need to behave that way, but they've been taught that they do. So once you go through all of that and you get your disability status, you still are not eligible for Medicare for 2 more years. So what they're saying is, we want you to go through all of these hoops in the traumatic experience and then wait for 2 years so that you can get adequate care, so that somebody like Dre would be able to access funding for a wheelchair and not have to wait for someone to pass away. We say 2 years. And what that does is, most people, not most, a high percentage of people either succumb to their illness or they don't follow up on it. And that's how we save money in the Medicare system. So I remember when I got my Medicare card, I cried. I literally cried. And Medicare still is expensive, but it's I just want to stress that point. So for you, Dre, where are you now with this? Do you have health insurance? Do you have some sort of safety net helping you, or what's the situation?
So I have health insurance at the moment, but that brings me to the second thing that happened. I was beginning to recover. I was somewhat I'm not gonna say recovering. I wasn't fully recovered from my knee and ankle and hip injuries, but I was, learning to live with it. I was working crazy amount of hours. And when I was 21, I worked so much that I had a 27K saved up and about 10K in my checking account. So I felt I was pretty financially set. And then in 2016, I got sick with my autoimmune disease. The doctors haven't figured out exactly what it is yet, but it says an autoimmune disease, and they said there's hundreds of thousands of them. So it's like picking a needle from a haystack. So what happened with me is, during April of 2016, I started like having pains in my eyes. I thought I was just looking at the computer too much. I worked at a desk. I was an administrative director. So I thought it was just looking at the computer too much. Then in July of 2016, like my eyesight went completely black. I couldn't see anything. And the doctors eventually figured out I had uveitis and photophobia. So it's inflammation in somewhere in my eye, I don't remember exactly, that pretty much causes me to go blind when the inflammation and pressure in my eyes gets too high. So
you've got glaucoma.
It's kind of like that. It's funny you said, because the medication I take for it causes glaucoma. So
oh my gosh.
It stops from being blind in the short term, but over time it causes glaucoma. I'm like, wow. So it's like I'm blind if I don't take it. I'm blind if I do take it.
That's insane. That's insane. And do you know what the difference is? I suffered from a very similar thing, but mine is glaucoma, right? But the drainage angles in my eyes are very steep and the pressure doesn't adjust properly. So I actually had to go to the hospital and get a procedure done that drills a hole with a laser through your lens to allow the pressure to equalize so that you don't have these glaucoma incidents, right? The difference between you and I, Dre, is that didn't cost me a cent.
Yeah.
And that's insane. That's abhorrent to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Dre, you mentioned you've got a surgery coming up, something you've been waiting for. And that was my first thought of, boy, does this poor kid have insurance? And even with insurance, you're going to get bills afterwards. So yeah. You're focused on the positive now with this surgery and maybe gaining some mobility back. What is this whole experience like? Did the doctors and surgeons that you talked to, were they more concerned about insurance and pay for, or how's this going to work for you?
So doctors always ask for insurance. That's just what they do. If you don't have it, like, oh, we can't see you. So I'm lucky that I have it at this point. But the doctor that I went to as the first doctor actually took my what's going on seriously. I remember a previous doctor told me I had cysts in my ankle, and I didn't really know what that was. And I looked up and I'm like, oh, I pretty much have Swiss cheese ankles. So none of the doctors took it seriously until this doctor. They just say, oh, rice, rest, ice, compression, and elevation. I'm like, that doesn't work.
Right.
So this doctor got to the root of the
Yep.
problem. I'm gonna have surgery to actually repair what's causing it. So I'm excited because I'll be able to walk properly for the first time, hopefully, since I was 17.
Nice.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah.
So for all the other Dre's out there who don't have insurance, are working 2 and 3 jobs and trying to get by, Medicare for all. Now, I don't want to ask this question in the same bullshit performative way that we see DNC members. If you had $4 extra on your paycheck, what would that mean? You know damn well what that means. But Dre, Medicare for all, what would that mean for you in particular? Because you're so much younger than I am. What would this do for you?
Medicare for all would mean the world. When I first started having my eye issue, I got a bill of $10,000 and some change. And I thought I had insurance. I thought my insurance would cover it. They wouldn't. So the biggest mistake I made is every time I got a doctor's bill, I paid it off right away because I was told my eye issues would be good in 6 months. But it's how many, 5 years later, and I'm still having the same issues. So I went completely bankrupt trying to pay off my medical bills because I knew if I let it accumulate, it's going to cost more because of interest. So I'm like, I'm paying everything off at once. I'm gonna be fine in a few months so I can make that money back. But the fact that I didn't recover, it put me in debt. And then I still have the same issues. Having bad credit because of trying to pay off medical bills and then can't afford other bills. So having Medicare for all would mean the world to me and anybody, because anyone could get sick randomly. I obviously didn't know I had this autoimmune disease till I turned 21, so it was pretty random. So Medicare for all is going to help. The people who are rich don't necessarily need it, but everyone should have the same coverage that the rich has and the people in Congress have.
Absolutely.
Like everybody in the rest of the world has.
Yeah.
But with the entire, so here was a little thing that changed, and it changed under the Obama administration. So I used to be an independent insurance consultant. What I would tell people in the situation when you have those kind of medical bills is slow pay it. Whether that means $10 a month, and I don't care if they bill you for $10,000 or $100,000, you slow pay it. Because your basic needs and survival come first. They will get their money. Don't you worry about it, because what happens at the end of the year is that hospital doctor's office writes it off as a bad debt write-off, and the state reimburses them while they're still taking the money for your payments. And it would not affect your credit. Under the Obama administration, towards the end of his administration, that changed. So it can now affect your credit on a slow pay. But a slow pay is still better than missing a payment. So I have personally done this. I owed was it $200,000 on some of my medical expenses, and I slow paid that shit because you still got to eat, you still got to pay rent, and like I said, when you are in a disabled state, like Instacart, I'm fortunate that I can use Instacart and have somebody shop for me because I can't drive. They don't give a driver's license to blind people. There's no public transport, but it costs me more for all of these things. And these are small expenses people don't realize. But real quick, I want to get to some of the comments. So Robin is wishing you a good outcome for your surgery. So Robin, thank you so much for that. And then Gary Seth says, the war on drugs also spreads its specter of terror on the disabled, which is why it's my principal focus. So thank you, Gary. And he says, the war on drugs drives the price of pain relief to infinity And all the while, the US government is willing to spend infinitely to keep you sober. And yesterday, New Mexico joined the list of states that legalized recreational cannabis. And,
Woohoo!
right. So this is a big step forward, particularly in a state like this where you have a high percentage of meth users who are self-medicating. Let's see if we can treat those people for that addiction and get them over cannabis. And then even Dre, in your situation with glaucoma, sometimes, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but sometimes that is a cannabinoid is prescribed to help with pressure and pain. Like I use it to manage pain. So I think Gary's onto something there when it comes to the war on drugs, why is it still Schedule 1? It makes no sense.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. And in fact,
Because
Biden
if they
administration-
change
Biden
it,
can change that.
yeah, they
Biden
could.
He can move all the drugs at Schedule 1 to any schedule, Schedule 4 or 5, and it could be sold in stores. But he doesn't want to change that because he was the author of the crime bill, and they went heavily after people who were drug users.
Well, in fact, I just read a story where this came out in April that he was toying with the idea of keeping the Trump administration's mandatory minimum sentencing. And all of the justice officials were like, please don't do that. And it looks like he's going to move forward with keeping those minimum sentencings, particularly for fentanyl. So these are the people who are self-medicating through pain and all of these other things. So here and again, we have people who have some sort of chronic pain, disability, whatever it is, and it could be just depression, still a mental health issue that would be addressed more effectively, adequately through a humane system like Medicare for All.
Definitely.
Yeah, because and I'm not going to put you on the spot and you don't have to say anything about this, but I know that people with chronic pain, and I've gone through this, it's severe depression, right?
Yeah.
And you can't walk, you can't get out of bed, you can't move, and no matter what you do, you're in pain. You can't help but fall into a depressive state like that. So why wouldn't you self-medicate? Take your mind off it, or dear God, get an hour of sleep. So
Yeah.
So now, what are the next steps for you after surgery? Like, where do you go from here?
So my next steps, it's going to be a 6-month recovery process if everything goes well. So that's what I'm hoping for. And then after that, I'm probably going to get back to working. I don't know if I'll be able to work in the office again because of the issues I have with my eyes, but we'll see. We'll see.
Right, and I think that a lot of disabled people, like as I mentioned, the disparity in pay rate, because companies recognize, oh well, we're going to get a tax break for hiring you with a disabled status, but we don't have to pay you as much, and you don't get the same rights as regular workers in the workplace.
Right. And your office is on the top floor and the elevator's broken.
Exactly. So we see this time and time
I've had
again.
that experience happen.
Oh, geez. And here's the thing, and this is when I went back and looked at the Americans with Disability Act. There was a change made in 2008 to expand the definition, right? But one of the news stories that I am personally aware of, because I was working on this, that does not come up on a search, is there was another amendment that was made to the Americans with Disability Act. This was bipartisan. There were Republicans and Democrats. Now, as a disabled person, you have to personally bring your own lawsuit, a civil suit against your employer or a business that has not yet conformed with a law that's been around for 30 years. And this means ramp access, elevators, or other types of accommodations for disabled people. So that was changed in 2017 quietly. So what that means now is every disabled veteran, every disabled American, it's now on you to petition the business and then bring the lawsuit yourself with all this copious amounts of money that you just have laying around. So That's an interesting fact for everyone out there. when we talk
Yeah,
about
make
this.
sure, Dre, that after your surgery that you don't trip on all that money laying around, and hurts your re-hurt your ankle, because then you have to start all over again, right?
Yeah, all this money I got laying around.
Yeah.
Right. Well, this kind of prompts entrepreneurship. We know that you've got this great successful show that you do on YouTube, your political commentary. Keep it 100, Dre. I love everything that you do and the way that the perspective that you bring to these headlines. So this is obviously something that you can do from the comfort of your home safely, effectively. Aside from working outside the home, have you given any thought to entrepreneurship under, other circumstances?
Yes, I couldn't really figure out exactly what I wanted to do other than doing political commentary. I used to write for a website doing the same thing about 4 years ago. Yeah, actually right before the issue happened in my eyes. But I couldn't continue that because you can't really write articles when you're blind.
Yeah, it makes it difficult.
Yeah.
So
Well, listen, I would say that, all of the things that you've gone through in your young life with your ankle and your knee and your hip and your eyesight, right? It's human beings find a way to survive, right? They find a way to get through it through their own innovation and through the help of friends and family and those kind of things. But what kind of life is that for us? What kind of life is it that we're just surviving? People need to thrive. People need to enjoy their lives and not look back at the decades of when they were alive and say, oh, well, I remember the 20s, they weren't so great. In the 30s, they sucked even worse. And that's no way to go through life. We have to work together as people and try to increase our lives in a better way for everyone.
Absolutely agree. So just a lot of comments in the chat here for you, Dre, wishing you the best of luck. And I think we all do. Please keep us posted. We definitely want to follow what you're doing and make sure that you're okay. You have what you need. And I know that the recovery time from a surgery like that can be significant. So please keep us posted. Keep posting your videos and let us know what you need. Okay.
Will do.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining
And
us.
if I had $400 in my pocket right now, Dre, I would rent you a room in Tahoma, so you could go there, hang out.
With air conditioning for one night.
Yeah, but you got to get there on your own from New York, so so you better start walking.
Excellent. So I just want to thank you, everyone in the chat. You've been so respectful over this subject, and I really appreciate it. So thank you, Seth, and thank you, Holly. Thank you, Leslie, and I'm going to say Misanthropic. There are a ton of you in here this morning. Good morning to you, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining the conversation. And Jim, yeah, a federal jobs guarantee would help us work and survive together. Absolutely. 100% agree with that. So Andy, that's all I have for this morning. And my internet held out. We got a break from the hurricane. So
And talk about divine intervention. Oh my goodness. We were able to hear you straight through for an hour, and your internet's probably now going to go off for 3 weeks, right? To make up for it. So I'll see you when you get back.
Yeah. And on that note, I just want to let everybody know that we never do this. We're going to take a vacation on Friday and Monday because of the holiday. And I haven't seen my kid in over a year, and he's coming here. So I'm going to take that off. Canada Day is Friday. So
it's Thursday, actually. It's July 1st.
Oh, well, happy Canada Day.
Well, thank you.
So everyone turns into a maple leaf, has poutine, and
yes, and slips in the maple syrup.
Right, exactly. So what we will have for you is the best of the best. We have some content that you have not seen yet particularly the Fred Hampton leftists. And one of those might actually be Jim, the federal jobs guarantee one. I just love that segment so much. So we will still have great content and programming for you on Friday and Monday, and then be back live on a Wednesday next week.
And if you have some spare time, please go to Keep 100 Dre. Please support our friend on YouTube. He does some great work over there. Thanks, Dre. We so much appreciate you being here. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you. I enjoyed being here. And I want to say one other thing.
Yeah.
The video you did on leadership last week was amazing. I love that video. The one person I would like to shout Monique Waterman, because she fits into that category of I learned the different leadership styles in college, but whatever the leadership style you were describing, Carrie, that's what she fits into. So that was an amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we really appreciate you being here.
We will have more of those.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes, as soon as the hurricane ends.
Yeah.
For all the rest of you.
That's all.
Yes, thanks so much, Carrie. Everybody else, stay safe wherever you are. Stay cool. Look out for your friends and family. And if you see people in your community that are suffering because of the heat or whatever, please give them a hand out, because you know your government's not looking out for them. Anyways, I hope you all take care. Have a great Wednesday. And we are going to see you in a week from now. So Carrie and I get a vacation. Woohoo! Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
We bout that, ayy. We in the zone. We out here, yeah. Spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog, we keeping it G.